speaking of kind of ups and downs, and this is what this is another team where I look at it, and I'll be honest with you. I got one of my former interns, Zach Drapkin, is an analyst for the Eagles. So like I root, I'm much like you, although my tree is not as nearly as big as yours. You probably have to root for somebody on every team, but like I have a little piece of my heart with the Eagles just because of his success there. But I look at this team in Philadelphia and I think, okay, you had Howie Roseman. By the way, Howie Roseman's son was in my class at Wharton, so that was kind of cool. Where I was like, so they're a family, by the way, that's interested in the stuff that we care about in analytics, and you look at how they've constructed their team, where Norman Brayman and all those guys sold it to Jeffrey Lurie in the '90s. They had their ups and downs. They get Andy Reid in the fold. We're talking about Andy Reid in a little bit. Andy Reid, of course, 4 straight NFC title games, 1 Super Bowl appearance. They have another NFC title game in 2008. It kind of goes a little bit poorly for them. They get on the horse with Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly shows, much like, in a Shanahanian way, a little bit differently, of course, but in a Shanahanian way, they go playoffs with Nick Foles, 10-6 with Mark Sanchez, and that the power sort of gets ceded over to Chip Kelly a little bit. And then the roster kind of atrophies because, as you'll say, I think more than even I will say, once a brilliant head coach does not necessarily give rise to a brilliant team builder, and so that it kind of got a little bit rough there. Chip Kelly gets fired after a 6-9 start to the 2015 season. They give more power to Roseman. A couple years later, they're in the Super Bowl, win the Super Bowl against the Patriots. That's amazing. But then they get at a crossroads again, right, where Carson Wentz is not working out, and Doug Peterson is sort of, the message had grown stale there. And I think this rebuild here is one of the more impressive things ever. They go Jalen Hurts out of Alabama in the second round. They take a year. They take Nick Sirianni. Sirianni develops a run-first kind of offense. Defense is almost no talent in 2021, and yet they still make the playoffs because they had an easy schedule. And then this offseason, they decide we're going to get some players. And they go James Bradbury. They go, they traded for Robert Quinn midseason. They get Hassan Reddick, former Temple Owl. And, of course, they trade a first-round pick for A.J. Brown, and now they're here, right? They're here at a 14-3 record, if I'm not mistaken, and they're 2.5-point favorites in this game. I look at the Eagles, and I think they're a model. They're a model franchise for how we should be doing this thing in the NFL, and yet it's not necessarily, a lot of times what we hold as the pinnacle for, how to run things, it's always survivorship bias. It's always like, oh, well, this group got a bunch of good lucky things happen to them, and now they're this way. And yet I just went through a bunch of stuff that went wrong for the Eagles, and yet they're still here today, preparing for an NFC title game.
Well, look, it comes back to, it starts at the top, right? I think the relationship that Howie has with Jeffrey Lurie is vital. And I think they work together really, really well. They understand each other really well. They've been through their ups and downs, of course, when Chip Kelly was there. And our guy Howie continued to hold on. Again, Howie is I think he was the executive of the year this year as well. I think
he's the favorite, but he's been executive of the year before. Yeah.
Of course he has, and he's just. I want to come back to this because I've said this before. Howie has a really good grasp of what's around him. As you all know, Howie was more like Mickey Loomis coming into the football side and the evaluation and the GM side from the business side, or he was from the legal side. Mickey Loomis down in New Orleans came in from the business side. They developed well. They learned well. I mean, Howie, to his credit, continued to learn football the way that he wanted to. Little aside, his son that you're talking about, another son, a younger son, I can't remember exactly which son it was. He's fascinated with scouting and wants to be his dad, and that's always a cool thing, right? He doesn't just want to reap the benefits of going to games and seeing cheerleaders and watching games. But just to finish up with Howie this way, Howie's got a really, really good understanding. One of the things I'm really impressed about with Howie, with Nick Sirianni, they have a great relationship, which I really like. And I say this respectfully to Nick, Howie has never been all about the coach. When you look at, and there are some stats out there, I wish I could pop them off right now, but they've done what they're doing with a different head coach and a different quarterback, right? What is that? you'll find it for me. But the reality is it's really, really important. There's consistency at certain levels. It's not always about this heavy-handed coach that comes in there that runs roughshod over everyone. It's a really good working relationship between the GM, the head coach, and of course the owner. And I do say this, really, really important. Howie has such a good understanding and a belief, and he keeps itself it all in perspective for him. He'll hire guys like Dave Caldwell. You can say what you want to say about David at Jacksonville. Dave is one of the best talent evaluators in this country, as well as Matt Russell, who he hired from Denver, who was the assistant GM there. He's got the right people around him, which is really, really important, right? You can't do it alone. You have to surround yourself. You have to have enough confidence. And I think Howie does a really good job of saying, let's do this together, boys. We'll reap the benefits of it. And I think that's where I will shed my light on the makeup.
Yeah, that, for sure. And I think that we've talked about it numerous times on the show. Like one of the great symbols of a leader is somebody who's willing to delegate because they're confident enough in their own abilities, and they know to make progress in this world, you have to hire and give power to people who will do things that are different than the way you've done them the whole time, and yet you maintain the core integrity of how you're trying to build your program. I think, they were a team. I think of Nick Sirianni. Now, I posted in the chat the Sumer Sports Twitter account, which you should follow if you're interested in any of this stuff. But Nick Sirianni, what I find great about him is, last season he was calling the plays, right? He was a head coach who was a offensive coordinator who didn't call plays. Indianapolis for Frank Reich, a guy we both really like a lot. And he goes to Philly, and I think for a lot of these men, it's like, I want to call plays because I want to prove how brilliant I am at this, right? And it's sort of similar to a GM who's like, I want to stay evaluating even though I'm the decision maker now. And to Sirianni's credit, halfway through last season, he gave his coordinating duties to Shane Steichen, who is now, a head coaching candidate, and he just became the head coach, right? And a guy that makes decisions and everything. And if you look at that Twitter thread that I posted, Nick Sirianni's added almost a win to his team just by doing the right thing on fourth downs, 2-point conversions, not calling timeouts in the wrong place, and not getting delay of games. There was a really good question from Ashley here. Said, are there any stats or analytics that talk about evaluating head coaches? Is there a prominent statistic that makes Kyle Shanahan good? There's actually two questions here, right? Shanahan is actually not necessarily as good at the fourth downs and all that kind of stuff as a guy like Sirianni. Where Shanahan's great is what we call scheme uniqueness. So basically taking a data set and saying, how often do you run 21 personnel? How often do you run inside zone, outside zone? You do like a principal component analysis. You look at how different his play calling data is than the rest. And that's where Shanahan's an outlier, right? Where he's just, and this is why they do so good this time of year, he's just a hard guy to play call against, or, to prepare against. Mm-hmm. And that is something, uniqueness matters in football because the game is a small sample game. And your weeks are short, and you do not, if you can make the other team change completely, like imagine planning for the Dallas Cowboys offense and then having to plan for the San Francisco 49ers offense. Like that are two totally different things. And if you can be that left hand to everybody else's right hand, you can be a prominent figure there. And I think, with Sirianni, he just has leaned into this idea of I'm the CEO coach. And I'm going to be the guy that riles everybody up. I'm going to be an advocate for my players. I'm going to do that kind of stuff. And a lot of times what's really interesting is the analytics in football often will support that approach. Everybody wants to go for fourth downs, right? Your quarterback's an absolute bust on short yardage plays. Then lean into them and put the game in your hands of your players and not your kickers, for the most part. And you will have success. And he's really done that. And I look at this team and I think, they don't have the best quarterback in the world, but they surround him with players to make him look the best. And to me, that is a very, very solid mark of who the good coaches are. We were talking about Jalen Hurts as if he's an MVP candidate like a month ago. And we all know that he's not like a guy that you would put on the same plane as a Patrick Mahomes. But if you're a coach that can make us all believe that for just even a moment in time, I think you're a good coach.
Well, and I would say this, I experienced it back in 16 or 17 when we came back after, our bad loss in 16. And of course, there's Philly going to the Super Bowl and doing what they did winning the Super Bowl. And I am confident in saying I don't think that team could touch the team, and respectfully to the team and the players, I don't think they can touch this team overall. What I think this team is right now, it is a very, very impressive team. I don't know who goes toe to toe with them, honestly, down the stretch. It'll be interesting to see how it is. Again, it'll be fun to watch San Fran and Philly. I get it, but I think they're in a really, really good place right now.
Yeah, if you look ahead betting markets, the Eagles are favored in a potential matchup against both the Bengals and the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. If you were to do that look ahead, that is something to think about. The Niners are actually underdogs against both teams on the look ahead. Just again, that's kind of something just to put in your peer review. Let's